Hello everyone, my name is Case, and welcome to the show, That's a Wrap. The show where we discuss everything cinema related. Today we're going to talk a little bit about special effects, blockbusters, and sequels. Today with me I have a couple of lovely gentlemen here to help me discuss these items. We have Matt Bennett, who is an assistant professor at the University of Cincinnati's Blue Ash branch, as well as Aaron Bates, who is the regional manager at the Danbury Cinemas. Guys, thanks for coming.
Thank you. Thank you.
Before we get started, I just kind of want to ask a general fun question. What is your favorite genre of film? And if you have a specific film in that genre, can you let us know?
I've always been a big fan of the American film noir films of the 40s, and my favorite has always been Out of the Past with Robert Mitchum.
That's a great film. My favorite genre is probably psychological thrillers, particularly Hitchcock films, the classics, and Rear Window is my favorite film.
Okay. How do you feel that the film industry has changed over the years?
Our industry as a whole, both on the production and the exhibition side, has moved to digital in the last 10 or 15 years. Not only are films being primarily shot digitally, we are now as an industry transferring all of our projectors over to digital. So the whole industry has gone digital, and that's been the big turning point in our industry.
And as it relates to special effects, the clarity of the image has gotten so much greater than it has in the past. We can actually enjoy the spectacle of special effects much more than we did in the past.
Okay, and do you think that special effects, though, they've come so far that the audience cannot, necessarily relate to, where we came from, our roots? Can they actually still enjoy a good story without all the special effects?
Yeah, I think good movies are always just good movies, and I think effects as a whole are more dominant in movies, but I don't think people are apt to say, I'm not going to go see this movie because it doesn't have special effects in it. But certainly those kind of movies where there's lots of explosions and things from outer space and so on, those kind of movies are obviously very successful, but there's always exceptions to the rule.
I think story is most important with film, at least in the classical Hollywood style that we're still working in the industry. And so special effects are subservient to story. If the film is not good in the seed of its idea, no special effect is going to save it.
Okay. So what films do you think have stood out, for special effects? Like which ones do you think special effects and then you think of a film, like if there are any?
Yeah, I think Avatar was probably the most recent phenomenon, something that was kind of a milestone movie. And we've had those throughout the decades. Jurassic Park in the early 90s, the Star Wars films in the late 70s, early 80s, The Matrix. Those are the kind of movies that come to mind when you say a really great example of special effects.
Yeah, that's true. And special effects have been a part of the movie since the advent of cinema. Very early filmmakers, George Méliès, for example, was a magician and used his magician skills to create visual special effects on film. So it's been there. That was in 1902, was the Trip to the Moon, one of his most famous films. So special effects have been integrated with film since very early on.
Do you feel that special effects have come as far as they're going to go, or do you think there's still room for improvement?
One of the characteristics of special effects is that it's technology, and technology is always developing. We've seen huge changes in special effects in the history of film already. A series of films that I like to show to showcase the development of special effects are werewolf films. So 1941's The Wolf Man, Jack Pierce did the effects for that. Very simple. When Lon Chaney is transforming, he's sitting in a chair, the camera's framed really closely on his feet, and we just see a dissolve with hair growing on his feet, and that's the transformation. We don't see the rest of him. Suddenly we cut to him and he's in his full costume. From there, late 1981, American Werewolf in London, we start to see more on screen the things that were left out of the original Wolfman. Okay. We start to see more of it on screen.
And then just kind of a follow-up question to that. Do you think at some point, maybe in the near future, 20, 30 years from now, people will be looking back at films like The Avengers and Avatar and saying, those special effects were awful, just how we kind of look back, at films from that era?
Certainly history's sort of proved that, I think. I think that film people really enjoy looking back at films that are 20, 30, 50, 60 years older. and we appreciate the craft. But yeah, I think people look at those films and go, "Oh wow, that looks really bad." I mean, I've heard kids today say they see the original Star Wars and they go, "Oh, that kind of looks, funny. That doesn't look like it's supposed to look or whatever." Whereas, I saw Star Wars in '77 and it was like mind blowing. So yeah, it's hard to see where we're going to go as an industry as far as effects go. But certainly history has proven that, yeah, every 10, 15 years, something new comes down the pike and changes everything. So it's certainly possible.
Let's move on to blockbusters. So first thing I want to ask you, what is each one of your definition of the word blockbuster?
I think blockbuster, when I hear that word, I think about from Star Wars and Jaws and Star Wars they were movies that were extremely dominant, that people lined up around the block to see. They had enormous staying power, and I think the biggest difference now between movies that are huge successes like Titanic and back then was now we have more screens. We have theaters typically have 10 to 15, 25 screens. So the difference is there's still enormous amounts of people coming up to see the movie, but movies don't typically play longer than 4 weeks, and I think 20, 30 years ago they would play 10 months, a year. So that's what comes to mind when I think of blockbuster.
Okay, so then how, if at all, are blockbusters in competition with, say, independent films or cult classics?
I think those are two different markets. I think that the independent film market has increased since the early 90s when Sex, Lies, and Videotape came out and was kind of an international success.
Yeah, definitely two different markets, both in the sense of the audiences for those kinds of films, but also the venues. A lot of independent films would only be shown like an art house or single screen theater, and we just talked about the upgrade to digital. A lot of those independent theaters can't afford to do the digital upgrade, so there are a lot of them that are going out of business.
Okay. All right. So how can successful blockbusters spawn sequels or spin-offs? So if like James Cameron was watching this right now, pretty likely, by the way, but
Right.
what tips would you give him to, maybe
Oh, I wouldn't give James Cameron any tips, but
snap?
but I think there's a formula that if product A makes money, then we need to make another product A. So typically sequels are made with a formula in mind. Well, if it has 1, 2, and 3 elements, we got to make sure the sequel has 1, 2, and 3 elements.
And that's part of the formula that's working. They want to make sure same characters, same basic storyline, same atmosphere in the film is repeated. And those sequels that haven't followed suit with the original, in general, haven't been very successful. And the one that comes to mind is Halloween 3.
Okay.
Which did not have Michael Myers, the killer, that brought audiences in the first and second films. It was a completely different storyline. And it's interesting in its own right, but hard to see it as a sequel.
The whole idea of a sequel is that people know what they're getting into. They see a movie that was successful, and if there's a sequel coming out, the studios on the one side know that they've got a built-in target audience that's going to show up, and people at home can see the trailer on television and go, "Oh, I liked the first one, so I'm going to go see that." So in essence, it's just a way for the studios to secure revenue. They know this product sells, we're just going to sell it again.
Is there such a case as a bad sequel? I guess I should rephrase that. Is there such a case as a good sequel?
Very few.
Yeah. Can you name a few, if any come to mind?
Godfather 2
Okay,
and
good.
The Empire Strikes Back.
Great. So how does hype influence the audience into seeing sequels? Is it like due more to the special effects, or are just kind of fanboys? Like, do they just want to see the continuation of their favorite like superhero or something?
Advertising has been part of cinema since the beginning. The fan magazines were really early forms of advertising, and they were mostly produced by studios from the beginning. So while audiences might think that they are just getting some interesting information on their favorite stars, the tabloids are a big part of the hype. The secret lives of the stars behind these films plays a big part in what makes audiences go see them.
Okay. Well, on that note, unfortunately, we are all out of time. I'd like to thank you both for coming and joining us. So no better way to say it than that's a wrap, and we'll see you next time. Thanks so much.